My name is Vladimir, and I welcome you to my channel. Two wars. The most grandiose tank battle of World War II is, of course, the Battle of Prokhorovka, which took place on July 12, 1943. According to major sources, there were 1,500 tanks involved, 800 on our side and 700 German tanks. In this video, we will not compare various sources for counting this armored equipment, but rather talk a little about another fact. In a battle that lasted just one day, the Red Army tankers achieved an unconditional victory. In fact, it is fair to recognize only the overall assessment of those events. Indeed, our soldiers demonstrated outstanding heroism and were able to withstand the heaviest blow from the enemy, which ensured the overall success of the Red Army in the battle at the Kursk Bulge. Contrary to popular belief, the famous Battle of Prokhorovka lasted an entire week, from July 10th to July 16th. July 12th is the third and most difficult day of the battle, when the forces of Pavel Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army counterattacked the 2nd SS Panzer Corps of Paul Hauser. Initially, it was expected that the 5th Guards Tank Army would break through the German front and advance towards Kharkiv. In his memoirs, Pavel Rotmistrov describes his task in this way. But the pressure from the Germans on the southern flank of the Bulge was very strong, and by July 9th, the Germans had already broken through 2 lines of defense, meaning they had only one left before Kursk. But the pressure from the Germans on the southern flank of the Kursk Bulge was very strong, and by July 9th, they reached the last position, which was located right under Prokhorovka. If they had breached this line as well, the road to Kursk would have been open, which would have meant the success of Operation Citadel. By this time, the 1st Corps of the 5th Guards Tank Army had reached this area. In order to get there, the Soviet units had to undertake a forced march on their own for a distance of over 300 kilometers. The equipment proved to be weaker than the people. Due to technical reasons, almost a third of the armored vehicles broke down during the march. In addition, the units were stretched out. On July 11th, more than 100 tanks and self-propelled guns did not reach the concentration area. Fortunately, such a march came as a complete surprise to the Germans. They simply overlooked this maneuver, and there were no Luftwaffe attacks on the marching columns or the crossings. On July 10th to 11th, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps under Paul Hauser managed to occupy advantageous positions and establish anti-tank defenses there. The units of the 5th Guards Tank Army found themselves in an extremely unfavorable position. The strike group could not deploy widely and move into operational space. They were to advance in a very narrow area, 10 to 12 kilometers, between the railway and the left tributary of the Dnieper, the Sel River. The estimates of armored vehicles that participated on both sides vary significantly across different sources, ranging from 1,000 to 1,500 tanks. However, the ratio remains virtually unchanged, approximately 2 Soviets for every 1 German. The casualty figures look much more sorrowful. The proportions of 1 to 3 to 4 are not in our favor. The reasons for this are quite objective. It should be noted that the Battle of Prokhorovka did not begin with a head-on clash of 2 armored forces. Rather, until the evening, the tankers under Rotmistrov continuously broke through the German defenses with frontal assaults. It was on them that the majority of the losses fell. Only by the end of the day did the units of the 18th Corps, under the command of Major General Boris Prokhorovka, manage to achieve the impossible, break through the defenses, and reach the rear of the 1st SS Panzer Division. The counterattack was the last resort to stop this breakthrough and prevent further success. It is important to remember that nearly a third of Pavel Rotmistrov's army's tanks were light T-70s, which had little chance not only against Tigers, but even against T-3s and T-4s. Regarding the outcome of the battles on July 12th, it is commonly said that neither side achieved success, due to, respectively, heavy losses, because the front was not broken and neither side advanced. On that day, the Germans lost about 25% of their equipment. As for Rotmistrov, the losses were around half, and in some units, tank losses even reached up to 75%. But it is important to understand that the numbers naturally varied from unit to unit, so the situation was somewhat different everywhere. However, the overall picture was roughly like the one I just described. It is important to add that initially this operation was even regarded as a defeat in the Soviet Union, because on July 12, 1943, Rotmistrov's tanks suffered enormous losses. The Germans were not pushed back, and they were unable to transition to a counteroffensive accordingly. By the final stage of the operation on July 16th, they were completely drained, and the losses amounted to about 334 tanks. Additionally, 200 tanks were under repair. To investigate reasons for heavy losses, Stalin sends a commission led by Secretary Central Committee Malenkov After 2 weeks of work, the commission comes to an unflattering conclusion. Pavel Rotmistrov, the commander of the 5th Tank Army, faces a show trial and most likely execution. Marshal Vasilevsky speaks up for him. In his report to Stalin, he claims that although Pavel Rotmistrov's losses amounted to 60%, by the end of the operation, the Germans' losses had risen to 75% of their original strength, effectively destroying the enemy's best strike group. It was here, having withstood a tremendous blow, that the Red Army was able to go on the offensive, leading to the victory at the Kursk Bulge. In principle, from a statistical point of view, it was quite objective. In the offensive that began after July 16th, many German rear maintenance bases were captured, and the tanks that had been damaged at Prokhorovka became classified as irretrievable losses for the Germans. Here, Stalin changed from anger to mercy, and Rotmistrov was awarded the Order of Kutuzov of the First Degree for his contribution to the victory in the Kursk Bulge, acknowledging that, despite the losses, the battle should be considered victorious. But in reality, it was not until the late 1950s that this grand tank battle was first discussed, because Ivan Markin wrote about it. A little later, the memoirs of Pavel Rotmistrov himself were published. Someone might add that the country was led by Nikita Khrushchev, who was a member of the military council in the southern section of the Kursk Bulge. This also played a role, which is why this battle gained such popularity. There can be different opinions about both the old and new assessments of this battle, but one thing that cannot be denied is that the victory at the Kursk Bulge was a turning point in the Great Patriotic War. What do you think are the reasons for the significant losses of Soviet tanks at Kursk? Please share your opinion in the comments, give likes, and subscribe to my channel. All of this will greatly help its promotion.